Is the minimum wage too high? Would reform lower it or scrap it to boost aspiration?
There's an argument the minimum wage is too high for younger workers, particularly given that we've lowered the level at which NIC is paid to £5,000 a year. So do one or the other. Do one or the other. Either lift the cap at which NI is due, or lower the minimum wage for lower workers.
Do you think the minimum wage is too high?
Let's look at what businesses are saying. I don't think that we should be raising it anymore. For example, when I was business secretary, I raised the minimum wage.
Two parties, between them polling at around 45% of the country, the Conservatives and Reform UK. Both of them right now in 2026 are making the same argument to the same people. Conservative leader Badenoch has said that the minimum wage should not go any higher. Her words, quotes, "If businesses cannot pay it, none of us are going to have a job." Nigel Farage goes even further. He argued the minimum wage is already too high for young people and has proposed cutting it. Think about who hears that argument. The people on minimum wage. The young workers that Farage wants to pay less. The people in insecure employment who most need a wage floor. These are the same people who in significant numbers are voting for these parties. I have a master's degree in economics, and I want to explain to you why this argument is wrong and why it is being made by people who benefit from you believing it, and why the theory that supposedly justifies it, which is trickle-down economics, has never worked in 50 years of trying. So first I want to talk about what trickle-down actually claims. So let me be precise about what trickle-down economics actually says, because the argument sounds reasonable on the surface. It goes like this. Imagine a pyramid. At the very top, a tiny triangle are the wealthiest people and the largest corporations. Trickle-down says give money to that top triangle, tax cuts, deregulation, reduced obligations, and the theory is that those people will invest it, create businesses, create jobs, and eventually that prosperity will work its way down through the pyramid to everybody else. Sounds like a logical chain, but buried inside is an assumption that almost never gets named. The assumption that the wealthiest people are the most enterprising, that given more money, they will use it productively, that they will create rather than hoard. But here is the problem with that assumption. The core principle of economics, and I say this again with a master's degree in economics, is that the incentive to enterprise is the profit motive, and the profit motive operates across all social classes. A working class person with a good idea will be significantly more motivated by profits than a billionaire where it's just chump change. Or more specifically, for the billionaire, £50,000 is a rounding error. They will get around to it, maybe. But for the working class person, it would be life-changing. They will move heaven and earth. So trickle-down does not just assume that money given to the rich will be used more productively. It assumes that money given to the rich will be used more productively than money given to anybody else. That is the claim. But the evidence against it is overwhelming. So next I'm going to look at, has it ever worked? In 2020, researchers at the London School of Economics published a study covering 5 decades of data across 18 wealthy nations. They looked at what exactly happened every time a government delivered a major tax cut to high earners. Their findings were unambiguous. Tax cuts for the rich had no significant effect on employment and no significant effect on economic growth. What they did find was a sizable increase in income inequality. On average, every major tax cut reform led to a rise of 0.8 percentage points in the top 1% share of national income. In plain English, every time a government cuts taxes for the rich in hope that prosperity will trickle down, what actually happens was the rich got richer and everyone else stayed the same or fell behind. So the test, Thatcher 1979 to 1990, what was promised? Cut the top rate from 83% to 40%, enterprise would flourish and prosperity would spread. And what happened? Inequality widened. Household debt grew. The North deindustrialised. Regional inequality worsened. The top 1% share of wealth rose substantially. And the test, Ronald Reagan in the USA 1981. So what was promised? Supply side tax cuts. Businesses would invest, jobs would follow. And what happened? The median wage dropped 0.6% over that period. The Gini coefficient rose from 0.37% to 0.43%. National debt exploded. And the Truss mini budget 2022, what was promised? The biggest unfunded tax cuts in 50 years. The growth would pay for itself. But what happened? The markets crashed. The pound collapsed. Mortgage rates spiked. Policy had to be reversed in weeks. The Prime Minister lasted for 45 days. And the test, the IMF, the LSE, Tax Justice Network, what was promised? Various pro-trickle-down claims across multiple decades. And what happened? All 3 institutions independently concluded no trickle-down effect. The wealth of the super rich tends to be amassed and sheltered in tax havens. So the Social Process Index, which measures the quality of life, not just GDP, found that the UK is one of only 4 countries to have slid back since 2011. The other 3, Syria, Venezuela and Libya, countries at war or in political collapse. The UK has declined in social progress through a decade of trickle-down adjacent policy during a period of nominal economic growth. The growth happened for what it was worth. It did not trickle down. So next we're going to look at Brexit, the cost of living and the missing trade. Now let us connect this to where the UK is right now, because you cannot talk about trickle-down economics without talking about Brexit. They are part of the same story. Before the Brexit vote, over 50% of the UK trade was with Europe. The EU was not just our largest trading partner, it was our dominant trading partner. And President Obama told Cameron explicitly in 2016, if Britain leaves, it will be at the back of the queue for a US trade deal.
The Prime Minister and I discussed the upcoming referendum here on whether or not the UK should remain part of the European Union. Let me be clear. Ultimately, this is something that the British voters have to decide for themselves. But as part of our special relationship, part of being friends is to be honest and to let you know what I think. And speaking honestly, the outcome of that decision is a matter of deep interest to the United States because it affects our prospects as well. The United States wants a strong United Kingdom as a partner. And the United Kingdom is at its best when it's helping to lead a strong Europe. It leverages UK power to be part of the European Union. The EU has helped to spread British values and practices across the continent. The single market brings extraordinary economic benefits to the United Kingdom. And that ends up being good for America because we're more prosperous when one of our best friends and closest allies has a strong, stable, growing economy. This is a decision for the people of the United Kingdom to make. I'm not coming here to fix any votes. I'm not casting a vote myself. I'm offering my opinion.
The people who sold Brexit to the working class promised a world of new trade deals, a global Britain, sovereign and prosperous. What they did not tell you, or what they were not capable of understanding, was 2 things. First, we were enormously influential within Europe. We were not trapped. We were powerful. And second, the trade we were to lose was over half of everything we sold. No new trade deal in the world was going to replace that volume, the proximity, the frictionless access we had with 26 neighbouring economies. What happened next was predictable to anyone with an economics qualification. Investment in the UK fell as businesses relocated or stopped expanding here. Tax revenues declined, trade barriers created import cost inflation, the Bank of England raised interest rates to control demand-side inflation that was actually cost-push inflation from supply disruption. So working people saw their mortgages go up to solve a problem that interest rate rises did not actually address. And here we are. Next, we're going to talk about why the working class keeps voting for this. Because here is the thing that genuinely puzzles me as an economist and as somebody who grew up understanding what it means to have limited resources. The working class, even people currently unemployed, even people struggling on low wages, have in significant numbers been convinced to vote against a higher minimum wage, to vote against worker protections, to vote for parties that explicitly favour the wealthy, against their own direct and immediate economic interest. Now, I want to be fair here. Some of those voters are not in employment and the minimum wage does not directly affect them. And I understand that. But many are in work and many more will be at some point. And the minimum wage is the floor below which none of their wages can be pushed. So how does this happen? It happens because the message has been shaped very deliberately by people with resources and platforms who have a direct financial interest in persuading working people to vote this way. Right-wing media operations, some of them running at a loss for years, funded by millionaires and billionaires who can afford to sustain those losses, exist specifically to push these talking points into working class communities. And it works. If a business cannot pay its workers the minimum wage, it is not a viable business. That is not a political opinion. It is basic economics. The profit motive, which is the foundation of capitalism, means that if there is a profit margin, the business survives. If there is not, it should not. The minimum wage is not what kills unviable businesses. Unviable economics kills unviable businesses. The argument that we should keep wages low to protect weak businesses is the argument that workers should subsidise bad management with their poverty. Next, I'm going to talk about the alternative, enterprise grants to the many. So what is the alternative? Because if trickle-down does not work, there has to be something better to do with the money that would otherwise go to tax cuts for the wealthy. Here is the argument that I want to make. The stated purpose of trickle-down is enterprise. The idea is that money at the top will be used to create businesses and generate economic activity. Fine. I accept that enterprise is the goal. Now let me show you a better way to achieve it. Imagine, instead of cutting taxes for the wealthy, you make enterprise grants available to the many. Let's say £50,000. Not to everybody, to every viable business plan, properly assessed, properly supported with infrastructure, mentoring, business planning, scaling support. Now think about that motivational difference. You give £50,000 to a millionaire, what happens? They might get round to it, maybe, when they have time. £50,000 to a millionaire is a rounding error. But you give £50,000 to somebody on $20,000 a year with a good idea and a viable plan. They will move heaven and earth. That is their life. That's their family's future. The difference in motivation is enormous. And across a population, the best ideas do not live exclusively at the top of the income pyramid. Never did. This is not trickle down. This is intentional, directed enterprise investment that goes to the people with the most to gain from making it work. It creates viable businesses that can pay living wages. It creates tax revenue. It creates employment. It does not rely on the assumption that the already wealthy will choose to be generous with their windfall. The countries that do this well, Germany, the Nordic economies, have strong small and medium-sized enterprises, SME sectors, more distributed economic activity and lower inequality than the UK. That is not a coincidence. So in conclusion, trickle-down economics has been tested in this country repeatedly over the last 50 years. The evidence is not ambiguous. The LSE studied it across 18 countries over 5 decades. The IMF studied it. The Tax Justice Network studied it. They all found the same thing. No significant effect on growth or employment, and a clear and consistent increase in inequality. The top 1% in this country have 230 times more wealth than the bottom 10%. That gap has grown under every government that has applied trickle-down principles. The growth happened, it did not trickle. The working class has been persuaded to vote for this by media operations funded by the people who benefit from it, by politicians who frame giving money to the wealthy as giving opportunity to workers. The framing is the lie, and the test is simple. Look at where you are now, look at your wages, your mortgage, your cost of living, and ask yourself, did it trickle down to you? I have a master's degree in economics. I'm telling you directly, trickle-down economics has never worked. It is not designed for you to work. It is designed to convince you that it will. That is the difference. And understanding that difference is the first step to voting like your interests matter, because they do. Please like and subscribe, drop your thoughts below, and share this with somebody who needs to hear it. And thank you.